Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Mike again from BavhausTV, and today we're going to do a starter on this e39. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is disconnect the battery. So, open. So we're going to open the trunk. We're going to remove the piece here, push it forward, and then this is where our battery is. So just open this, and we can just disconnect the positive terminal. So that's going to be a 10mm. I'm just going to disconnect that. Loosen it. Oh, this is actually the negative. I said positive prior because it was red, but it's the negative cable. Go like that. Make it real easy to prevent any arcing from happening. And then just on top of that, what I'm going to quickly do here is just take a rag. We're going to put it over here so that when we close the trunk, it doesn't actually latch. Put it inside. We're going to close the trunk. Now we are good to go remove the starter, so we're going to put the car up and set the camera up underneath the car. So we are underneath the car now. Transmission's here. The starter actually sits right here and goes in this way. It's braced from the front, and then you have the two bolts in the back where it actually goes through the bell housing and the transmission. So what I'm going to do first is there is a heat shield here, and it is kind of in the way. There's not going to be a lot of room to get this thing out. I've actually never done one of these and I haven't really researched how to do this, so you're gonna see me just naturally go through, me learning and showing what I'm doing as I go. Get this out. There's another 8mm here on this heat shield. You might not be able to pull this out entirely, but we might be able to just get it out of the way. Oh, and then you have another one here. So this is right up here. Oh, another one here. So, I think we actually can remove it. So I'll pop this out. Starter cable. You have a zip tie here. Yeah, I'm gonna cut this zip tie. Some dice, and actually like little zip tie cutters. Hold this through. And then grab this heat shield, pull it out, and that actually is awesome because now we have a direct view of that starter. So on the starter itself, there's two 10mm that have a separate heat shield for that. Just actually come over here and get an angle of that. So to get the heat shield off, there's two 10mm nuts that sit on the back of the starter. Actually, I'm not gonna be able to get that with that. It just gets a little too close to the block. Just loosen it up a bit. Okay, we'll do this one first. Gonna take these two out. One thing I didn't mention is obviously we're working on this car doing a ton of other stuff, so if you're just watching a specific video of us doing this, the tranny skid plate is off. We have the exhaust out, which is definitely gonna make things a lot easier for us, so you guys will have to work around the exhaust, definitely as possible. And the last thing we have is the wheel off, but all straightforward stuff. I'm not gonna put it all back on just to show you guys how to do it. So I think this should just come off now. Actually, there's one more in here. Oh yeah, right on the side. Pretty tricky. But you just basically take the wrench, put it down here, and right behind the drag link, there's one that goes in the side. Looks like it bolts like right by the solenoid. That up is actually a screw. Okay, that's that. So we have a couple cables. We have a 10mm right here on the solenoid. There is a 13mm as well. Make sure you have your battery out because if you arc this, it will scare the heck out of you and potentially hurt the car. Pull that power cable off. It's the big B+ cable. We have one more cable that actually goes in between. You have an 8mm back here behind the 13. It just goes up from like behind, so it was hiding pretty well. Okay, so once you have the 8, the 10, and the 13 removed, as well as the two nuts for the heat shield and the one bolt for the heat shield, you can go to the back and we're gonna grab ourselves an e-Torx. It's gonna be an E12, and we're actually going to take the two bolts out that are mounting the starter to the transmission. So you can find the starter on the bell housing of the transmission by where the little lump is. We're gonna go for, obviously, the one screw underneath and the one above it. So we obviously have our exhaust out, so this is easy for us, but I'm sure if you have swivels, extensions, all sorts of fun tools, you'll be able to get that starter out the same way we are. Let's put the exhaust back up, but I just decided to hold off just to make our lives easier over here. The other one is right up here. That is in the way, so we might have to go behind this cable. Alright, so I'm gonna go over the trans brace with the longer extension. Plug it into the extension I already got hooked up there. Make sure everything's nice and even. And then we're just gonna do it from back here. Like that. Okay. Grab the bolt. Now our starter should be released. So I'm gonna pull it out of the bell housing, pull it through, and there we go. Not a big deal at all. I already have the starter in my hand. So now that you have your rear starter bolts out, you're just gonna grab the starter through this hole here, wiggle it, pull it, and then pull it down right through this opening, and there's your starter. So this only took us, what, 15 minutes, not even? Obviously we have some parts off it prior, but as long as you go after the right things the right way, no problems at all. So here's our two starters. You definitely always want to compare, make sure that they are the same, which we can instantly tell that they are. One thing I want to show you guys, because this is new to me, I've never seen this, just a little reason as to why we were going for the starter. The car did come in with no issues, but this is kind of like a Sunday Concourse M5. It's not really used much for like daily driving. So the owner of the car basically said that when he goes to some car shows sometimes, he'll start the car and he'll hear like a rattling or like a very long, extended, gritty crank, if that makes sense. So he did buy the starter, bring it, he diagnosed it himself as in wanting to change the starter, although the starter was still working. So just by pulling it out, I immediately found this, and I don't know if you guys can see that bushing right on the front of the Bendix is blown out. So he was spot on with the starter being an issue, and if you look, obviously this one won't move at all. There's just nothing there for this guy. So definitely crazy that this thing was actually even still working for as long as it might have had issues. Because look, there's a bushing that sits right back there. Keeps this thing from moving. But there you go. So let's get this one back in the car. All right, so that's the flywheel up there. I know the pitman arm or idler arm or whatever is in the way. That's where you're gonna be putting your new starter. We're just gonna go out the same way we came in, through here. Solenoid facing down. And get this back into the trans. Try and do this one-handed, holding the light. You guys can see. There we go. So just like that, and then now we're gonna go to the back of the trans and actually get those two bolts on the bell housing back in. So let's go back there. So the two bolts are identical, so it doesn't matter if you mix them up. So we're just gonna hand feed this one in, get it started. So the starter at least sits in place properly. So right now I can take my hand off the back of it, get the other one in. Smart to get both of them in first before you go tightening up one of them too much. Okay. Now that we got that done, we're going to torque the bottom one probably first just because it's more accessible. Hold the starter and kind of wiggle it so if you feel any resistance, you know that you have a way to change it rather than just sending these in. That would not be something you'd want to do. Okay, so right there it gets tight. Now we're gonna grab our extensions and do the upper one. Again, going over the trans brace. Moving that out of the way. Hooking it up, and I'm just gonna hand feed it. Try to get some resistance like right there. Okay. Tightening up this one now. Alright. And then now we're just gonna torque them to the spec. Alright, so these are gonna go to 45 Newton meters, which is just a quarter turn more than I did by my hand. Also, these are wobble sockets for the top one. I just forgot to mention that. Or wobble extensions. So that's gonna allow you to get that final angle at the end. Because it has to kind of go like around the bell housing and then somehow find its way back. There's a little bevel in the bell housing to allow this to go in straight, but if you try to just like feed it up by itself, it's not the best way to go about it. Okay. So the starter is reconnected to the bell housing. Now we just have to go reconnect the leads. So let's go do that. Oh, quick before we go, I'm just gonna put this back before we forget. All right, so I'm gonna start with the 8mm in the back. So I'm gonna unscrew the little 8. I left them all on just so I didn't lose them. I'm just gonna be doing them one by one. And there's a washer behind that. That washer off. Take your little 8mm. You'll be able to tell which one's the 8 to 10 and which one's the 13, obviously by their size, by the way they lay. Tighten that up by hand first, and then 8mm at 1/4 inch. Okay, doesn't have to go crazy tight. I just do hand tight. There is a spec for all of these, but it's honestly not one of those things that really needs to be spec'd. It goes against everything I normally say, but starter I just go until I feel comfortable with it being tight. I'm gonna do the 10 next. 10 goes kind of over that. Washer. 10. Socket. Okay, so right about there. I kind of just like where that felt. You have 2 10s up top. Get those guys off quick. The washers stay behind. You're just taking the nuts off. And then the new starter also did have one on the end, on the side of it, like above the solenoid. So you're not reusing any of the old hardware from the old starter, at least not if you're using. This is a reman Bosch starter. All right, I'm gonna get a ratcheting wrench because it's wasting too much time. Then we're just gonna get the one off the side. There's like a washer behind it as well. Something's weird about the way these bolts and nuts are cut, because that one got like right to the end and then started locking up. So that's that. We're gonna take our heat shield and put it back up. Turn it. That. And then put those nuts back on. Bolt back into place. Which is definitely gonna be easier said than done. It's on like such an angle that finding the right spot is gonna be half the battle, and then getting it started is gonna be another one. I just have to hold it from the back. Yeah. This is honestly the worst part of the whole job, is this stupid heat shield. Okay, we're gonna go until it's like tight, and then do our 2 up top. I'm honestly gonna take these 2 off, because I didn't like the way the thread was going. And as long as the thread is the same thread as the 2 I removed from the old one, I'm gonna reuse those. I just prefer them. And these have washers built in as well. We're gonna go with that instead. So I'm gonna reuse the old bolts here. Those other ones just are nuts. The other ones fit nicely. Okay, just until it gets tight. I'm gonna do the other one, the ratcheting wrench. Okay, just like that. I'm gonna go quickly wash that bracket up, or that last heat shield, and then we're just gonna put that back up and call it quits. All right, so we have our heat shield cleaned here. We're just gonna put it back over like this, slide it back into place, and then we had this chilling here, so I'm gonna grab 2 of our 8mm. Make sure everything up front is lined up, so it does go over in the front, so you want to make sure of that. So this has to be pulled out of the way. This goes over that. That was our issue there. Now we're aligned perfectly. We'll put this one in first. Then this one, you gotta put this back in, and then we'll line up. Okay. We'll do this one first. And we'll do this one next. Pop this back in. We're gonna go back to the front. I'm gonna pull down underneath each other here. We're gonna get a couple threads caught on both of them. Get it nice and tight. And then now the last thing we have to do is actually go back to the trunk of the car and reconnect the battery. If you guys are working on this obviously with the exhaust still in, you don't have to put the exhaust in, we obviously do. So you'd put your wheel back on and your skid plate down here and then go connect your battery. But we're just gonna go connect the battery. All right, so we're gonna open the trunk back up, move this negative out of the way, pop that back open, reconnect our negative, 10 millimeter. It's nice and tight, close it off, grab the floor, bring it back, take the rag out, close it. That's how you do a starter on a e39 M5.